Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good evening, everyone. Today we continue with the Dukka Satya under the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra that we have been discussing for a number of weeks now. Now today, can you hear me properly? I think the volume. All right. Now today, last time we ended on the Anicca Vata Sankhara having discussed what this Sankhara would entail, right? And we put that into the practice along with the Anapanasati Sutra and discussed the sanskaras and how we let go of those sanskaras and how we also observe those sanskaras throughout the meditation we discussed. Now today we come on to the section on the Vipassana jnanas. But before we do, let us also read this part which we could not read last time. It is mainly the latter meaning that gives deeper significance to. For example, the following sentences of the Buddha that have been handed down in the sutras. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Appamadena Sampadeta. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Appamadena Sampadeta. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara is to say all conditioned things. So Sankhara, all conditioned things. Vaya Dhamma has the nature of decay. Vaya Dhamma. Appamadena sampadeta. Strive diligently with mindfulness. Anicca vata sankhara uppada vaya dhammino uppajjitva nirujjanti tesang upasamosukho. Traditionally recited at the occasion of death or funerals, Anicca vata sankhara. Impermanent indeed are the sankharas. The sankhara dhammas are impermanent. Indeed, anicca vata sankhara. Uppada vaya dhammino. Having it as the nature, dhammino, of arising and passing. Uppajjitva nirujjanti. Born they pass away. Uppajjitva nirujjanti. Tesang upasamosukho. Their stilling is true happiness. Now, when we observe or when we come to learn, first through learning and then when we observe the multifaceted nature of the mind, where we know there are different components or bases, roots through which the mind can operate, kusala, akusala, isn't it? Right? Then the mind can have functions where there is neither kusala nor akusala. This is a state where arahats live. Kriya. Then at moments where karmas give resultant, that is the rebirth linking moments, the functions that facilitate the process of rebirth and death, this rebirth linking bhavanga chuti processes, those are vipaka chittas. So these chittas that arise, we know they have all come down to 89 chittas between Chaitasikas, 28 rupas. If we are to take the Chitta Dhammas, one of the poignant factors that keeps us entrenched within samsara is the fact that we have tanha, greed, and ditthi views which cave or mold a sense of avidya, the nature of avidya that is in our minds operating. Now, when this avidya works on, of course, there is no prajna in these moments, or discernment is not there. This delusion laced with craving to be, to become, to continue, tanha and avidya. We know tanha and avidya is overcome by in the Eightfold Noble Path, wisdom. Wisdom is samma ditti, right views and right thoughts, samma sankappa. These are the two path factors through which we cultivate, develop prajna, right? Prajna. Now, when it comes to the path and moving forward in the path, I think it is clear to all of us that we do not move forward in the path through ditthi views. We move forward in the path through discernment, through consciousnesses that are by nature supported by the essence of the roots of alobha, adosa, amoha. Alobha is non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. එතකොට අනිච්චා වත සංඛාරා කිව්වාම when we say අනිච්චා වත සංඛාර, when the Buddha says අනිච්චා වත සංඛාරා, this is a meditator or a way that a person would see existence in terms of an insight. There are so many who have attained enlightenment through anicca vata sankhara uppadavaya dhammino uppajjitva niruddhanti tesang upasamosukko. Even a ditthi, even a view that we have, when the view is seen for what it is, let us say if we see the view for the mundane, the sammuti, the superficial manifestation of the drushti, meaning whatever story or whatnot, when we are looking at the story like the story is real, the story is important, the story is powerful, isn't it, everyone? Isn't it? If you're looking at the story, if you're perceiving the story as the story is important, right? Now, when the story is important, this is not there. When the story is important, when you're perceiving in this moment, you're having a memory, you're observing that memory as thinking or having no sense of discernment to understand that this imagery, this memory, this word diagram that has appeared in my mind, it is just a sankhara. You're taking it, you're accepting it as real. At that position, you cannot see this. Why? Drushti. That is drushti, isn't it? That is the point where a ditthi arises in your mind. Taking another view, imposing another view to the present, imposing another view to the present. When a view is imposed, what you are imposing, it's your belief upon the sammuti, the conventional world, the acceptance of the conventional world, right? An acceptance of what we see on the face, on the surface, on a very platonic, facial, superficial level. But when you look through that, and as you do with discernment, when you look through that, when the story disappears and you see the skeleton of that Dhamma, there you see, when you see that memory for what it is, what is it? A sankhara. When you see it for what it is, there you realize anicca vata sankhara, uppadavaya dhammino, then the nature of impermanence, because the sankhara, when it is simply perceived as a sankhara, the sanya doesn't drag in the hindrances or the tainted views that accompany them, but rather non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion works there in taking the Dhamma as it is, which is what we do with the breath as well, isn't it? First, we learn to let go of the breath. We observe the motions of the body, Iriyapata Bhavana, walking, standing, sitting, lying. In all of those postures, we observe the impermanent. So we see or begin to see the mechanical nature in this structure. And in that mechanical nature, there is an arising and ceasing, a beginning and an end, a beginning and an end, all prompting towards where all of these dhammas are what? Are similar. How are they similar? Sankharas. They are formations. It only becomes all of those relations of Dhamma, moment to moment, arising and ceasing, to be put into that sort of generalized Sankhara level. There has to be, of course, it comes through letting go with prajna. Prajnaving atharima. You're letting go not to get away from the pain, not because you know that clinging on to good is bad, or clinging on to bad is bad, not because of any of these things. You let go of them. A meditator learns a season, when you become seasoned in the Vipassana, you learn that you let go of these things because at the time, deval tula harayak naha. There is no core in them. There is no essence. Now, when there is no essence, why is there a validation of mind that comes into trying to validate the reason why you're letting go? එතන දෘෂ්ටියක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. හෝ එතන දෘෂ්ටියක් ආපහු අපි දෘෂ්ටියක් වහන්න තව දෘෂ්ටියක් ගන්නවා. This process has to then not happen through the lobha mula, but always happen through the kusala, the disattachment, alobha, adosa, amoha, rooted chittas, which are the kusala chittas that arise. When you're trying to let go of pain or when you're trying to get away from the pain, in those moments, a lot of lobha can arise towards the pleasure. But when a meditator sees no essence in that pain, in the emotion that says that the pain is real, you no longer see an essence there. එතන ඇත්තක් දකින්නේ නැහැ. මෙන්න මේක ඇත්තයි කියලා. Then it loses its power. There, anicca sankhara uppadavaya dhammino uppajjitta nirujjanti tesang upasamosukho. Those who realize that these indeed are sankharas, their nature is arising and ceasing. Born they pass, upajjita nirujjanti, their stilling is true happiness. And the only in the realizing that it is their nature that it arises and ceases, observing that nature, the stilling occurs as you let go. In this quote, Sankhara again is translated in various ways. Formations, fabrications, conditioned, compound things, conditioned phenomena. I agree here with, for example, Achan Chah, who translates as conditioned phenomena and writes, the word Sankhara refers to the mind and body. Regarding Dukka, it is said Dukka vata sankhara uppadavaya dhammino pajjitva nirujjanti tesang upasamosukho. So here are not anicca but dukkha. Insufficient indeed are conditioned phenomena. Their nature is arising and decay. Born they pass away, their stilling is true happiness. Now, when you say dukkha, this is not referring to just mere, again, not just mere pain, mental and physical pain. Here it refers to the nature of insufficiency, the nature of suffering, this nature that we described earlier, if you remember here. Dukkha Sacca, commonly called the truth of suffering, does not merely refer to actual painful feeling, but teaches that on account of the law of impermanency and change, all phenomena of existence, even at the states of highest bliss and happiness, are unsatisfactory and bear in themselves the seed of suffering and misery. The seed of suffering and misery. Now, when one becomes an enlightened being, or as one steps on to the stream entry, the first level of enlightenment onto arhatship, chunks of this suffering is um, let go of, or the conditions that allow this sort of dukkha satcha to be present in one's conditionality is let go of. So it is only arhants who then do not have that dukkha, right? But within their dukkha satcha, still the dukkha satcha remains up until complete demise. That means up until the breaking up of the body, because still as long as there is a body, that there is that nature of dukkha is still present there, right? But the suffering is not. The pain or the wailing over that pain, the mental aggregation of that pain, the mental aggregate of that pain is not there. But can pain be physically felt? Of course it can. Can pain be physically felt? Of course it can. But the mental process of proliferating that pain in any way will not be present. Will not be present. Now, coming down to here, it is evident that on the side of samsara or life in general, there is a rising and dissolving of sankharas, which all are found to be dukkha. Suffering here, which all are found to be dukkha, meaning all of those dhammas, 81 chittas, 52 chaitasikas, 28 rupas, within them are ingrained the nature of unsatisfactoriness. Right? The nature of unsatisfactoriness is the nature that whatever dhamma that arises, that dhamma will exist on to dissolution. And even at its peak, as it peaks, it will come back down into a state of bhanga. The unsatisfactoriness, the sheer unsatisfactory nature that exists there is truly seen by a meditator when the mind is stilled, the dukkha satcha. As long as we are alive, that is, as long as the five aggregates, khandhas, or in other words, mind and body, nama, rupa exist, dukkha is present, even for an arahant. An enlightened person who has completely overcome mental suffering, There is still physical suffering. With his wisdom, he has realized and fully understood that all mental and physical phenomena, all sankharas, are ultimately unsatisfactory. And this insight is without suffering, without being frustrated, fearful, or depressed. By this knowledge, finally he is able to let go, to turn away, to give up desire and attachment for all sankharas, and to find the unconditioned, to attain Nibbana. How to achieve this knowledge or insight without suffering from the omnipresent nature of dukkha is described in the stages of insight. Now, in the initial stages, that is, before coming to the state of Namarupa Paricheda, where you discern between mind and matter, this is the particular position where you do your samadhi practice to develop your concentration. You learn how to be with one object. You learn of the present moment. You learn of santati, Pachupanna, and you learn how to come from the Santati Pachupanna, which is the story story creation, self creation, though that sort of proliferating thought that arises, any sort of story that is there, you will see that there is a Santati Pachupanna. That is a manifestation of not one moment, but a manifestation of many thought processes. But then when you learn that this could be a story and continue to observe, you come into the present moment. Progressively, step by step, you come closer, you come closer. And as you do, the closer you come to realizing and being in the truest present, the sankharas that arise, the stilling of the mind's need to be in the past or ruminating in the past or planning the future, that aggregate disappears. When you say that aggregate disappears, everyone, remember that is skandha. When you close your eyes, the aggregate of the eye, and if you're not focusing on any visual data, the aggregate of the eye disappears. If you're not focusing upon the sound, the aggregate of sound disappears. If you're observing the eye, if you're observing the sound, what you're observing is then slowly you realize, okay, where is a part where I'm judging and making comments, concluding remarks. So then in that position, the sankharas are heavier. The mind realizing this, they slowly start to sort of stop doing so, to stop making up thoughts and proliferating thoughts. Then sankhara tika adu venuva. Now this aggregate reduces, right? When the aggregate reduces, that means the sankharas reduce. The sankharas sort of sorted into the five aggregates are still aggregate. ඒ සංඛාරය තමයි ඒ aggregate එකට ඒ පුරවන්නේ. When you realize that sense of aggregate being there, for example, when you close your eyes and then when you're looking at the breath, the thoughts, you're calming the thoughts, the breath is becoming calmer. This is the panchaskandha, the five aggregates. The more thoughts that you have, sanyakanda, the more that you dwell and ruminate in the feelings of these thoughts and sort of really dwell within them. The Vedana aggregate. Because these thoughts are pleasant or unpleasant, like or dislike. Whenever like or dislike arises, there you see a Vedana, another aggregate, another Sankhara to creating or bringing about or create being the condition for another Sankhara. Aggregate, aggregate, aggregate. When you're absolutely in the present, the condition for building aggregate is no more. Because in the present, away from the past and the future, when you realize you have solid ground to be, to stand on, within the present, at that moment, owing to the bliss, the sukha experience, a meditator falls to wanting to be in the present. Here, now the aggregate, when the past and future is cut off, a lot of the aggregate is cut off. That is what you realize in your meditation, right? That is aggregate. Now, you or I, before sort of thinking in that manner, would say, oh, I had a lot of thoughts today, or my mind was very relaxed today, isn't it? Right? This is the way that we would say. But ඕක ස්කන්ධයන් වශයෙන් අපි බැලුවොත් Manasi, when our houses are messy and things thrown about and weeks worth of laundry and not vacuumed and cleaned and with all stuff all over, what do you want to do? Clean it up. Clean it up. To clean, you must realize that it is first messy, that it needs cleaning. To do so, regard the weight or the sankharas as aggregate. When the mind is feeling stressed, the aggregate is more. Try seeing it in that way. Try seeing it in that way. Now, if I'm to start speaking, let us say very, very fast, right, and sort of jump through the pages and be quite hectic in the lesson, right, you will have a lot of aggregate as well. like a steaming coach. Right, when it gets a bit tougher or you're getting a bit confused, now more aggregate, isn't it? But here, when you see it as aggregate, it's no longer a problem. When you see it as aggregate, it is no longer a problem, is it? Now, if you are, if you're getting a cleaner to professionally clean something, let's say you've given your car to be professionally cleaned and you're like, clean everything out, right? And they do, their job is what? In seeing that it is now a car that needs cleaning, what would they do? They clean. Here the sankharas, the more aggregate there is, මෙතන තියෙන දුක්ඛ සත්‍ය ස්වභාවය වැඩි. දුක තේරෙන තැන් වැඩි. The weight of the suffering, the insufficient nature is so much so. But to come on to that level, let us see how we would experience that. From the Anapanasati, right? I've taken this one because we are familiar with this because I've used this one before. Now, in the technique that we follow, now a lot of when it comes to the purification of virtue, that is usually something that you go through when you're sort of focusing on your precepts, on your livelihood, when you're sort of committing to the practice. This is something that we adhere to and try to bring our minds to, and something that also starts worrying us because we want to sort of have a clean slate of sorts to be able to continue the practice with a good, wholesome mind, isn't it? Right? So we go along the lines of trying to fulfill Sila Vishuddhi, purification of virtue, through the taking up of the precepts, through the restraining of senses. Through the restraining of senses, this could be in a variety of different ways. Um, the purification of livelihood, trying to sort of bring yourself from positions where you would earn in a wrong way to earning in a proper way. Um, then reflecting on the uses of the requisites. Pacha Sannisita Sila is when you are focused about the requisites that you would use, the requisites being medicines, clothing, shelter, and food. You are careful on the requisites that you use, meaning this is to say you are consuming what you are consuming with reason. You're not sort of overindulging yourself or sort of letting yourself go to a spray of overindulgence, right? But you're capping it. You're capping it in a certain way, not because someone told you to. You're not allowing yourself to just overindulge and spoil the mind or allow yourself to go too much into the karma beyond reason. Right, beyond reason. This could be in a variety of different ways. This could be with how you consider your relationship with food, or your relationship with exercise, or your relationship with things like shopping, right? Things that you do. This could be a variety of ways. මොකද්ද මේ ඔක්කොම මේව ඔක්කොම අපේ මේ සංඛාර ජීවිතයේ තියෙන සංඛාර අඩු කිරීම. All of this is to do with getting rid of a certain kind of nuisance, sankharas from our lives, so that we can be more focused upon things that are actually important, or maybe to have a better root of, I would say, maybe this is better. Rather than saying focusing on things that are actually important, if we would say to have a better grounding of the moment, to be grounded in the moment. Because we see with all of these sealers, these restraints, this certain barricades that we are putting on to our livelihood through understanding of not overindulging, because we do not want to give way to proliferate that sort of thought and that sort of goal in our life. Because the goal is different to a practitioner in this sense. He is not a karma bogi. Karma bogi nahi. Then we come on to when the mind is, or as we cultivate that the sila, we also get the support or cultivate the chitta vishuddhi, the purification of mind. That is what we are currently doing, right? Currently doing mostly. With the breath meditation or the elements meditation, we then observe, we learn samadhi building, samadhi building, samadhi building. Through this samadhi building, the place where the samadhi building ends is the position where we are able to clearly define between mind and body. Mind and body. We are able to, we see the first separation of mind and body. Mind and body. In the Pavuk technique, of course, that is through the seeing of a kalapa. Seeing of a kalapa. Now, Ditti Vishuddhi, this is where the Nama Rupa Paricheda comes in, where you discern knowledge of the discerning between mind and matter. Here you are able to discern between mind and matter. See the Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, the four elements, the material qualities at the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the heart base, the mind base, mind and body base, separate between the two. All of that is done here, everyone. That means you see the difference, you discern, discern the mind and body, and you know For example, like you would know oil and water, you know mind and body. Hari, mind and body. What mind and body is. Now, one might say, but I already know the mind and body, right? And let us say, how do you know in certain times when the raw Vedana arises, the physical pain and the mental pain is different. Often, whilst the physical pain is there, we often experience a proliferated version presented by the mental suffering or the way the mind takes it. Way the mind takes it. Now see, at that moment, the person assumes the physical pain is in par with what I am experiencing mentally. Now, unable to see the difference between oil and water. Does that make sense? Unable to see the difference between that oil and water. Here, Ditti Vishuddhi, one sees the difference between that and sees Pache Parigha, the cause and effect nature as well. Cause and effect nature as well. Then, upon seeing the cause and effect nature and going beyond into Sammasana Jnana, this Dukka, the Dukka Sacca, falls upon or starts becoming a poignant, intense experience for the yogi at the stage of this Bhaya Jnana, right? Which is Namarupa Paricheda, Pachaya Parigha, Sammasana, Udayabhaya, Bhanga, Bhaya. This Bhaya Jnana is where we first, or we do experience them initially, especially at Sammasana, where we are contemplating Anicca Dukkha Anatta. But upon seeing the Anicca nature, Udehavaya, and seeing that everything, all of these sankharas make it, all of these sankharas cease, we see a, a hollowness, a profound sense of hollowness that arises, hollowness out of the mere experience of knowledge that everything ceases. That everything ceases. That is where the dukkha satcha, owing to the capacity and level of the meditator, the dukkha satcha becomes fully experiential and an isolated experience at that level, at that state. Dukkha satcha. At that stage. No matter how you practice Satipatthana, no matter what the object of meditation is, with successful Vipassana meditation, you will pass through these realizations. Kayanupassana, the contemplation of the body, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana. Dhammanupassana, contemplation of phenomena according to the different categories, hindrances, aggregate subject to clinging, internal, external, sense bases, enlightenment factors, Four Noble Truths. The objects that are suitable for insight should be observed are only ultimate realities, Paramatta Dhammas. Only these can be directly experienced and have the three characteristics, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. These are all sankhara objects. Now, when one relates to the objects that are suitable for insight and should be observed are only ultimate realities, paramata dhammas, the volition, chetana, here becomes very important. First of all, from chetana, what is it that I want to see? What is it that I am looking at? Right? Then, of course, the base of the mind or the foundation of the mind being within Dhamma, of course, is very helpful in the mind being able to maneuver the mind in a manner where there is no ditti, there are no views, proliferating views, there is no sort of weak distorted views, sort of taking object. The person understands how to sort of look at something without a view, basically, and without clinging, without clinging, without the proliferation taking place. At that position, when the meditator is looking forth, observing, opening one's mind, then what the meditator sees as a result of it, owing to how much understanding the meditator has, the meditator is able to look beyond the sammuti, the conventional part of observation, and look forward towards the ultimate reality. If I am to repeat that in a different way, the intention of the meditator to not settle upon the sammuti, but to arrive through discerning thought at the present moment. So, what you see essentially, whether it is a kalapa, because not all the meditation techniques would take you towards kalapa particularly, right? But they will take you towards the essence of the ultimate realities, the paramattha dhammas, which when it comes to a deeper concentrated practice, seeing the kalapas fruitfully and authentically gives a meditator deeper in-depth experience, an understanding, a touch of that Dhamma, which the Buddha is pointing towards, right? Right? Only these can be directly experienced and have three characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta. These are all sankhara objects, all nama and rupa. Concepts are not a part of it. Concepts. Concepts or conventional realities, table, car, auntie, are all transient and changeable, but do not have the nature of anicca, not existing before it comes into being. Having come into being, it immediately passes away. Right? Upatiti banga. Right? But can even be used as samatha objects because of their apparent constancy. Certain objects, like the concept of man or animal, can suffer, but not the concept of table or other inanimate things. The issue is whether a thing or being has consciousness. If it does, then the accompanying universal mental factor of feeling naturally is present too. So Dukkha Vedana is possible. But that alone does not constitute dukkha. The table in this, the table, this thing, the concept can of course not suffer. But if we perceive the table with sharpened concentration, trained mindfulness, and clear insight vipassana, we will intuitively realize that this compact looking unit table consists of many individual material phenomena, rupas. They occur in material groups called rupa kalapas, each consisting of 8 inseparable material or physical qualities. Patavi, earth, apo, water, tejo, fire, vayu, air, vanna, gandha, rasa, oja. The Suddhashtaka. Color, smell, taste, and nutritive essence. Whilst we discussed last week's Thursday class, how earth, water, fire, and air are the primary elements, and the other 4, color, smell, taste, and nutritive essence, are derived natures coming to be because of the way that the earth, fire, wind, and water elements manifest according to their natures. So anything that would arise would then automatically, because they arise in the material world, right, color would be. For this color to be, everyone, remember the reason that color is there is because of light. All right, the material properties that are present, which gives or has a certain pigmentation resulting from the physical structure of it. I mean, really just school uh, right? School science, really. Color is then that color is also conditioned. Now, see, what if the sun wasn't there? What if light wasn't there? Would color be there? No, right? Color wouldn't be there. But here, the color would not be seen here, be taken by the eye consciousness. For the eye consciousness to take color, to see color, there must be light. If there is no light, this color is not present. Right? Now, there are universes in that has no light whatsoever. Also, apparently, so far away from the sun, so dark as well. Those places where the light does not reach, their visual object will not be a thing, will not be taken as object because the condition of light is not present. හරි. ඔතකොට මේ රූපයේ තියෙන ඔතකොට what is the sun and what are the rays of the light or light rays? The light rays are also certain quantities of earth, water, fire, and air element. The light is too, those particles too, is again earth, water, fire, and air. Mahabhuta. Mahabhuta. Today the class is very quiet. May ආගෙන ඉන්න.
But if the script was brighter, I would have enjoyed it better, I think. Sorry to say that, Bhante. Lettering is small.
Let's see if we can make the lettering bigger.
A little bigger, please, Bhante, if you can. I can see, but it's not very distinct. Small now. Ah, that's lovely. Yeah, big. That's nice. That's lovely.
Right.
Thank you, Bhante.
So, yeah, were we? Right, concepts.
Sips.
Right, concept. The nature of transient. Although they are transient, but they do not have the nature of anicca. Right? Do not have the nature of anicca, meaning uppadatiti bhanga is not present. But can even be used as samatha objects because of their apparent constancy. Apparent constancy. Apparent. Not that they are actually they're apparent constant. Certain types, like for example, apparently constant can then karunava vadanota, when you're doing metta bhavana, karuna bhavana, you're taking a concept, right? A man, let us say, we are to all the people. That's a concept, right? To all the men, to all the women, concept, to all the children, concept, to all the animals, concept. All of that is concept. Now, because that concept is apparent, because of the apparent constancy, they can be taken by taken as object for samatha practice. Certain concept like man or animal can suffer, but not the table. Why? Because of the lack of dukkha vedana, the mental factors leading to dukkha vedana. Dukkha vedana. But that does not alone constitute dukkha. The table, when you train with your vipassana and insight, then you see that the rupa kalapas are there, right? The rupa kalapas, each consisting of 8 inseparable materials, avinibhoga rupas, which are the suddhashtakas, patavi, apo, tejo, vayo, vanna, gandha, rasa, oja. Color, smell, taste, and nutritive essence. These rupa kalapas constantly arise and immediately fall away. Thus, the rupas in the table are impermanent, unsatisfying, dukkha, and without self, anatta, right? And anatta. At this point, you see the only type of dukkha that you experience at this point is viparinama dukkha, which is the suffering connected to change, the nature of change, and the sankhara dukkha, that is the inert suffering or the suffering as a nature that is present within all of these dhammas, the mind and the body, within the mind and body, and without self, anatta. A concept such as a table, for example, is mind-made. And we are just taught that it is a table. It only exists when someone, an observer, perceives it as such. The individual material components of the table, however, exist for a short moment. They arise and pass away independently of the observer and his mind, or his or her mind. Why? Because of the nature of anicca. Because of the nature of anicca, independently they arise and they pass away, independently of the observer or his mind, because when it arises, it passes away. Right? It passes away. And when it passes away, the mind refreshes it by cognizing yet again, taking another object. Rupas, these material formations, sankharas, can arise because of 4 causes. Kamma, chitta, uttu, ahara. Because of karma, they can arise. Because of consciousness, they can arise. Because of utu, they can arise. Because of food, nutrition, they can arise. Ahara. According to Theravada, rupas definitely exist outside of us and in inanimate matter, where they arise due to temperature, climate, weather, independent of any mind or observer. The normal person, however, only observes concept with which he identifies, to which he clings, and therefore suffers. And therefore suffers. Modern natural science observes and measures rupas in the best case. And of course, this often involves mind-born matter, chittaja rupa. Also, that dependence on the observer, or rather, the observer's consciousness, comes into play. In many sutras, especially in the Samyutta Nikaya, it is clearly stated again and again that rupas has the nature of dukkha too. This is also the case in the Buddha's second discourse to his 5 fellow ascetics. Is rupa permanent or impermanent? Impermanent. But is that which is impermanent suffering or joy? Suffering. Is it then appropriate to regard that which is impermanent, suffering, changing as this is mine, this is me, this is self? Of course not. Right? Of course not. And I think again and again, when we, at moments of insight, that is also what we come to in different ways, we come to realize that because if this is so මේක කොහොමද මගේ වෙන්නේ මේක කොහොමද මගේ වස්තුවක් වෙන්නේ මට අයිති දෙයක් වෙන්නේ නේද most translators translate rupa here as form and mean corporeality, or rather the own body. But according to the next passage, any kind of rupa, matter, or physical phenomena are included. Are included. Not just that of our body, although not just that of our body, although of course the matter of our own body is what is meant with the aggregate of matter, and is the most important for our practice. Rupa Kanda is the most important of our practice. Why? Because it is depending upon the Rupa Kanda that we come to experience the grossest parts of ourselves. By the word grossest, what I mean is the heaviest, the chunkiest, the most palpable, the easy to understand or the seeable parts of ourselves, which gives us an inclination towards impermanence, towards suffering, towards non-self. The gross suffering that we see in the outside world with the accidents, with the different calamities that happens to people or things, this gross suffering, when it comes to, it is like if one thing was destroyed and 100 million things were destroyed, what would be a greater destruction? 100 million destruction, obviously, right? And it's not just 100 million or a billion or a trillion. It is absolutely everything, moment to moment, interchanging, arising and ceasing. That's happening moment to moment, which is only relatable through the Vipassana. which is only relatable to the Vipassana. This will not become known to a person who does not want to know, but becomes known to a mind that is still. And this is aggregate. This is that aggregate. Now, in moments where we are in our focus, in our concentration, in samadhi, in jhana, in at these moments where the physical body is not an object of our concentration, at that moment, the aggregate of rupa, although materially present at that moment, but when the mind is not taking objects from that any longer, right, that aggregate of rupa is not there at that moment. Because there is no perceival through the aggregate of rupa. There is no tanha rising towards any of the aggregates of the rupa. But it is only in the mind that the meditation or the samadhi or the jhana is being kept and maintained. That samadhi protects and guards, by de facto, it protects and guards the body, the rupa khandha. It protects everything. That is the nature of samadhi. Right? But that is aggregate. Hmm? And is the most important for our practice. Whatever rupa there is, past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all rupa should be understood with full wisdom according to reality. This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. Right? This is not myself. Then, for example, if we are ailing, if we are troubled, if we are undergoing undergoing um, enormous amounts of suffering and pain, um, in thinking about this or perceiving this pain as yours, as a part of you, as your destiny, or that is only going to make the pain even more unbearable. If you're unable to take it from a discernment or rather prajna side, prajna round, where the mind or you're able to say, this is not mine, this is not me, this is not myself. Because if this was yours, then there would be no continuation of the mind on another body, right? And when you know that this body is not the only entire, the ultimate thing, but I have had many bodies, right? Many bodies, then if so, it is like you have so much of clothes and you are not so bothered about wearing the same thing twice, right? Because you have so many. So, so when you own one once, right? Think of yourself as a spoiled prince. One dress once. And then you don't want to wear it. You don't have to wear it again because you have so many at your disposal. So many, uncountable amount of new shirts and dresses and suits, everything that you could wear. So why would you bother hanging on to the old suit? Hanging on to those. ඒකට මේ අර මලේසියාවේ කවුද අපේ නායක හාමුදුරුවෝ මේ ධම්මානන්ද හාමුදුරුවෝ. Kirindi Dhammananda Hamdru very in a very savvy manner to his Malaysian devotees. He asks, when your passport is expired, don't you want to, isn't it, extend it? Who would want to wait with a old passport? So thinking in the same manner, at that if you actually think the new possibilities or opportunities that could possibly be in the future could be far more or far more appealing in comparison to what is. But if our attachment to what is and our doubt upon what is of the future comes into play, that is where the problem occurs. So it is not in the acceptance of this reality, but maybe a discomfort in the acceptance of the doubt which might be relating to what the future might hold. That is what we control, or that is what we realize as whatever rupa, past, present, or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all rupa. This is not me, this is not mine. ඒක තමයි අපි කරන්නේ. Vedanānupassanavi, when the pain is so much, when the pleasure is so much, being with the pleasure, being with the pain in a manner that the pain is not mine. This is not me. This is also transient, impermanent experience. Impermanent experience. And furthermore, we should understand that matter, even in our body, can be created by karma, chitta, but also just by heat and cold, and or by nutrition. Now, whilst the chitta does not have such, the chitta only has 6 places, the body has even more conditions, everyone. Don't you see? The body, when it comes to the body, the places that the body could arise. Now, when you take the mind has a 6 sense basis where the mind arises, right? Mind arises. The body has kamma, chitta, utu, ahara. Kamma, chitta, utu, ahara. උතුර ඍතු කියලා කිව්වම මේ ඍතුව කියලා කියන්නේ ඍතුවේ hot cold. You can be affected by both the hot and the cold at the same time. Right? Moment to moment, the hot and the cold can affect the structure. Chitta, you can have good chitta rupas, wholesome, nourishing chitta rupas, and then you can have draining chitta rupas moment after moment. Right? Moment after moment, without any form of other control. Here, the rupa, the ways you can see that the rupa, the grossness of the rupa comes by the fact that it is so easily affected. Hari, දැන් මේ පන්තිය ආහා ඉන්නකොට if you're seated in front of, if you're seated in front of a window, someone can throw something at you from the window. What if they do without any sort of pushing forward or anything? That could be again from unexpected ways, in ways that you don't even imagine. The body can be affected. කියන්නේ rupa titi rupa. Rupa titi rupa. Right. So it is not just one thing or 2 things or 3 things. It's so many things, including the earth that you walk on, the air that you breathe, the cold, the wetness, all of these things. Right? All of these things affects the body. Similarly, and in even greater detail, the Buddha explains that 3 characteristics of all sankharas in 10 groups to his son Rahula to conclude when the body is so gross. Thus, the focus on the body can be can be the foundation for the arising of so much of suffering. Because all of those, the more the conditions are, the more the suffering is. Because they're gross in nature. That is what gross means. There's more suffering. Except from the Rahula Samyutta, Rupa, and the Kanda Sutra. What do you think, Rahula? Of visible forms, are the visible forms the sounds, the smells, the taste, the touch, the mind objects, permanent or impermanent? Rahula says, impermanent, Bhante. But what is impermanent? Is that suffering or happiness? Suffering. Suffering. Now what is impermanent? Now what is impermanent? Suffering, changeable. Is it right to look at this thus? This is mine. This is I. This is myself. Certainly not, Venerable Sir. Certainly not, Venerable Sir. And again, we see that in our meditation, right? When we are with the breath and we realize that these forms, the sounds, the smells, the taste, the touch, the mind objects, we come to see and experience all of these things. And we regard them, we learn that they are impermanent. And when you see and when you observe that nature of the Dhammas, those natures of the Dhammas just arising and ceasing, when you observe in that moment with your mind focus, one-pointedness, you come to see that this nature, when it arises and ceases, whatever it is, that it has a certain, I like to use නිකන් පීඩාවකින් හටගන්නේ, පීඩාවකින් පවතින්නේ, පීඩාවකින් නැති වෙන්නේ. පීඩාවකින්. What would be the English word for පීඩාව? Um, um, I mean, it is with some sort of, what would be the right word for පීඩාව?
Pain, Bhante?
No, not pain. Pain, yes. පීඩාවක් කියලා කියනකොට යම්සේ බරක්. කිසි
stress.
stress.
impediment කියන්න පුළුවන්ද?
Impediment.
No.
Impediment. Anything else?
Stress. Oppression.
Oppression. Oppression is the word. Pida. Oppression. Oppression. Pida. It exists oppressed. Oppressed. Meaning, however strong that Dhamma is, as it arises with oppression. As it upada, titi, banga, all three, there is a certain sense of oppression that you feel, that you experience. This is not just a feeling of Vedana, but you truly experience this sense of oppression. Right? This sense of oppression inside as you observe. That oppression, that suffering, the nature of suffering, because that suffering can be, it's conditioned, it's oppressed, all these factors, there you realize, is this mine? No, this is not mine. Certainly not. Certainly not, especially when you see the cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. Now, when things are not so clear, when the mind is all over, then it is very difficult to lay your mind to a certain sense of rest to see this. So, whilst you're observing and these dhammas are working within you, it is very important to have that sila bit in the beginning, the foundation of our practice, that sila is very important because you remember that this is the foundation of the Chaitya, of this whole structure. And that is what they always teach us. And that has so much of depth and meaning. This sila is the foundation, right? Whilst, of course, the physical part of the sila can very easily break everyone. But the mental part of the sila, the conviction that you have, that is a bit more difficult to break in comparison to the physical one. Do you understand? Right? Now, that must be understood just because we do a lot of things in our life, certain things that we like to do, we do, and there are certain things that we do not like to do, but we have to do. But regardless, we do these things, right? Regardless, we do these things. When we do, if the mind falls into evil, then your whole practice is down the gutter. Right, down the gutter. If you have a certain sort of if you have a certain sense of a transgression, right, and then you give yourself entirely into that evil state of mind, your practice is gone. But if there is, of course, if there is in the other alternative, when a certain state, a condition of evil does arise, and if one is able to let go of that sort of proliferation or observe that, right, see the reality in that, then you can bring your mind into a position where you can still continue with the practice. At least continue with the practice. අර කතාවක් තියෙන්නේ මේ කතාවක් තියෙන්නේ මේ I have බුදුහාමුදුරුව ආනන්ද ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේගෙන් අහනවා the Buddha asks Venerable Ananda ආනන්දය මේ there is a monk in the Aranya who is sleeping all the time, right? And then there is a monk who is in the city meditating all the time. හරි? Who is better කියලා අහනවා. කාටද භාග්‍යතුන් වහන්සේ සාදුනාද දෙන්නේ කියලා. ආනන්ද ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ කියනවා Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's assistant says to the Buddha, Bante, of course you would praise the monk who is meditating. Even in the city he is meditating. Right? The Buddha says, Nē, Sariputta, I the Buddha සාධනාට දෙන්නේ කැලේ ඉඳගෙන නිදාගෙන හරි කැලේ ඉන්න එකට තමයි මං සාධනාට දෙන්නේ කියලා. You would imagine. And Venerable Anand is quite surprised by this. And he asked the Buddha, why, Bante? කැලේ Nagare inang, even though the monk meditates in the city is full of evils. The city is full of sankharas. That meditation will very easily fail. But Ananda, the monk, who lives isolated in the forest, even though he sleeps and is lethargic, when he comes to his senses, he will already have a mind free from the sankharas associated with the city. And at that time, when he resolves to meditating mind, being with sati, his samadhi will very easily grow ananda. He will flourish very, very fast owing to the fact that he lives in the forest. Kera. නේද? කො සාධනාඩයක්වත් කියන්න මේ කතාවක් කිව්වට කිසිම සත්‍යයක් නැහැ.
සාදු සාදු බන්තේ එහෙනම් අපිට ඉතින් ඕක කරගන්න බැරි වෙයි සිටි එක.
නෑ සිටි එකේ දැන් මේමනේ දැන් හිතන්න දැන් ඕගොල්ලෝ now you Devika you're at home.
Yes.
Right? You're at home, you're protected, but of course, we do live in the city, and of course, I would not in any way say that the city is far better than the forest, having lived in both. The forest is definitely far better, which also says that the task that we have at hand, is arduous, is something that we have to have. මේකට ලේසිම විදිය තමයි ඉතින් අර භාවනා කරාගෙන යන එක තමයි ලේසිම විදිය.
ඔව් බන්ට ඒක
නවත්තන්නේ නැතුව
කරනවා.
මේක කරාගෙන යන්න. Constantly කුසල් සිතක ඉඳී. Because for you get to a position where you are able to, or you're able to be born in a family, or your living situation, all of those things coincide and come into a pattern where you're able to go into a forest and live in isolation. That is also important. Because we do see, whilst people do get ordained, some monks are not able to be in the forest as well, right? Dangers. Some monks can't be alone. Sometimes they can't bring their minds to be alone. That alone. There are all these things. ඔතකොට in our own way, we do not compare, but in our own way, we have to make sure that we are progressing in some way.
Yes.
It is for that reason that the Buddha preaches this Dhamma called Dharme Kadapata කියලා Dhamma Dasa කියලා කියනවා.
ඔව්.
How you let your practice and evaluate your practice. So that evaluation Dhamma Dasa, Dharme Kadapata, the mirror of Dhamma, where you stand in front of this mirror and you evaluate, am I growing or am I fading? මම දියුණු වෙනවද මම පිරිහෙනවද? ඔතකොට ඒක උඩ the Buddha says, okay, upon that practice, that is the only way forward. Right? So whilst we අර සංඛාර කියලා කියනකොට මම හරි අකමැති, ඒ කියන්නේ even in our minds to say නම් අපිට මේක අමාරුයි කියලා හිතන එකවත් අපි ඒ විදියට කරන්න හොඳ නෑ. මොකද ඕව සංඛාර ගත වුණාම ඕව වලින් තමයි අර we get everything, right? But අර lack of self-confidence to walk in that. ඕක සංඛාරේ නෑ, ඕම නෑ කියලා කියන්න එපා. කොහොමද ඕම නෑ කියලා කියන්නේ? මෙතන මේමනේ වෙන්නේ. When that word is said, the moment that word is said, there is a sankhara. The moment that word is said, there is a sankhara. Right? That sankhara is like a flash. ඔතකොට අපි හිතාගන්න බෑ පොඩි වචනය කියලා තින්නේ ඒක යම් කිසි විදිහට සංස්කාරගත වෙලා. දැන් සමහර වෙලාවල් වලට මේ aiming ඔය වහනවල් වල අපි we have certain sort of visuals that we see, or certain interactions, brief interactions we have, and මේ brief interactions වලට අපි react වෙනවා. අපේ ධර්මයේ කතා තියෙනවා those brief interactions after after births, those interactions are coming up, right? And I recently got to know when it came to, for example, the Buddha, it says that the Buddha, up until all of the beings that would arise up to the destruction of the world in this cycle, all of those beings have been in some way or another received or has been a benefactor to the Buddha's generosity. ඒ කියන්නේ බුදුහාමුදුරන්ගෙන් දානයක්, right? The Buddha has eaten a morsel of food from the Bodhisattva. So that would mean that we have all, even maybe as humans, as animals, as whatever way, some way or the other, in whatever shape or form, we have been benefactors of some sort of dana. That's one. Two, when the Buddha gets up in the morning, right, awakens from his sleep, And he goes into his Mahakaruna Samapatti to sort of shed his light of Karuna over all the beings who are in Sansara at that moment, which means including us. And he looks at, it says that through his omniscience, he is able to look and touch the essence in all of our conditions to decide who has the ability of benefiting from me today. So every morning from the time that he became the Buddha up on to his death, the Buddha's passing, every single day for the ministry of so many years, he radiated karuna to all of us. According to what we have in the Dhamma, that includes us for sure. All right, that's number 2. That is also a way that we have received that dana, right?
Yes.
Received that dana. In that course, when we develop sankharas, I can't meditate, I can't do vipassana, I can't do this, that, apita karagan bari. These sorts of things, remember, because it is so focused upon the Dhamma, these things can, when you say, when you voice these things and think these things, these can lay a certain impression, right? So we don't even entertain such thoughts, right? Such thoughts, because those thoughts in self is aggregate. Thought is aggregate. Hari, this is like having hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste, right? Now, the moment that you have an aggregate, right? When the moment that you choose to use that sankhara, that's the aggregate. ඒ aggregate එක එකතු වෙනවා කියන්නේ සංඛාරෙ දික් වෙනවා. සංසාරෙ දික් වෙනවා. Because it is aggregate. ඔතකොට අපි සංසාරේ, so for this sansara, let us hope and wish and pray and focus all of our energies that we are doing, that we have been continuing to do this for so many years. And some of you might have been meditating more than my entire lifespan as well, right? And all of that practice has brought us to this moment where we sit at a crucial position in our lives. Which is where we have come to live life, and now we are in a position where we are looking back and contemplating upon the Dhamma together with all the life experience that we have. It is a very crucial stage. There is a lot of letting go that we have to do, that we have to bring our mind to. This letting go can be sometimes, if we are not willing to do it willingly, it will even sometimes be unwillingly demanded that we have to let go, right? In this case, the scenarios, remember everyone, හැම වෙලේම බුදුහාමුදුරන්ගේ වචනේ හොඳට මතක තියාගන්න, which is the fact is all of these things are sankharas. මේ රූප කය රූපස්කන්ධයක් පමණයි. This material body is only one birth, one body, and a whole set of conditions, right? And this body is not your be-all and end-all. There is continuity for all except for those who are arhats. Honey. So bring your mind through the Dhamma, let go of those things that causes you anxiety or some sort of fear in your heart regarding this inevitable inevitable experiences of life, regardless of whether you are young or old or whatever it is. This is life. Young or old, අපිට අදාළ කතාවක් නෙමෙයි. මොකද young or old කියන්නේ මොනවාද? ප්‍රඥාතියක්. Young or old is a ප්‍රඥාති. Young or old is a ප්‍රඥාති. It is not a fact of young or old. It is a fact of facing these realities of life. ඒකට මේ ධර්මයෙන්ම එන්නේ ඒ ගමන යන්න. මේ සියල්ලම, all of these things are impermanent. The body too is impermanent. The moment of death is just but a moment. Do not be afraid. When fears or anxiety, or when it comes to dealing with your own pains of every day, හැම වෙලේම let the Dhamma take over that process. And when with all of these blessings, wholeheartedly, with all of these blessings that we accumulate, may all of you be well and happy. ඕගොල්ලොට ලෙඩ රෝග අමාරු දුක් කරදර ජීවිතේ තියෙනවා නම් ඒ සියල්ලම මෙන්න මේ ධර්මයේ අනුභව බලෙන් ය වෙලා යෑවා කියලා අපි ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. ඒත් ඔය ලෙඩ රෝග අනතුරු ඒ සියල්ලටම මේ ධර්මයෙන්ම අපිට ඉස්සරහට යන්න without falling into a depression or sadness ඕව වැඩක් නැහැ. ධර්මයෙන්ම with dignity, just as we might have lived with dignity, we must face the encumbrances of life with that dignity, right? With that same dignity. And that is the way that people who have lived a good life with kusala also, conduct themselves with that same dignity. On the grounds that we understand that these are ultimate realities and these are prajnaptis, and our attachments and our fears arises out of these concepts that I have created and attached and clung on to through the proliferation of views, ditti, tanha. So every single day as we discuss these different parts and essences of Dhamma, may these Dhammas flood into our minds, our hearts. And with every step that we take, with every breath that we take, may we grow to see the Dhamma more intimately and more closely, and see how the Dhamma pervades through every facet of our life, our behaviors, and may we have the strength to find a harmonious balance in that regard. So we conclude the class for today, everyone. I will see you tomorrow for the Thursday.
Sadhu, sadhu.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
තෙරුවන් සරණයි බං.
නිර්වාණ සරණයි
Thank you.
බන්තේ.